Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Saturday, May 24th, 2025. This is The Excerpt. Today we take a closer look at a new tactic being used by ICE, plus Trump aims to overhaul regulations surrounding nuclear power, and we talk about a cheating scandal ahead of tomorrow's Indianapolis 500. ICE is now targeting people as they leave certain mandatory immigration court hearings. I spoke with USA Today national correspondent Trevor Hughes about the new tactic. Hiya, Trevor.
Hey, good to be here.
Good to have you as always. So just starting with the basics, what is ICE doing here? Tell us about really this new tactic showing up outside courthouses.
It's a little complicated to explain, but at the end of the day, it's really about scheduling more people for deportation quicker. There are many, many people who entered the country under Joe Biden's administration, and they are following the process that existed under Biden. What the Trump administration has figured out is if they cancel that process, they can then schedule people immediately for deportation. So that's what's happening here. If someone has entered the country within the past 2 years using the CBP-1 app, which allowed you to schedule an asylum claim, et cetera, the Trump administration has basically decided that they will drop the prosecution of those cases. And then that allows them to deport you immediately. Under normal circumstances, if you have a pending immigration case, you cannot be deported.
So, Trevor, just functionally, is this a case of, migrants getting this decision from inside the courthouse, walking outside, and then ICE agents are awaiting them for detention right outside the courthouse?
Yes, that's exactly what's happening. There have actually been some confrontations in Arizona and a couple other places now where advocates or family members of these folks who are being taken into custody are actually pushing back or really getting a little bit aggressive with these ICE agents because they feel like this is a very unfair change that the Trump administration has made.
Well, some advocacy groups are suing to stop the process, Trevor. What's the latest there, and what do many advocates argue as it pertains to the Constitution on this issue?
This is one of those situations where the Trump administration is sort of forging ahead despite a number of different court challenges on a bunch of different fronts. Advocates would argue that if you followed the rules that existed at the time, you shouldn't be punished because there's a new president who is changing those rules. Now, of course, the president has said it's practically impossible to hold hearings for more than 1 million people, 2 million people, 3 million people, and that there's no way that our court systems or the immigration court systems even could handle this. And so that's why they're moving to this expedited system.
Of course, this is really just part of a string of new tactics from the Trump administration. What else might be coming? What are you keeping an eye on in the coming weeks and months, Trevor?
Again, it's really important to remember the president ran on this platform. He is executing what he said he would do. And that we talked to, hundreds of thousands of voters over the course of the campaign who said this was the kind of thing they wanted to see. They wanted to see aggressive immigration enforcement. And I'll tell you, the emails I've been getting from folks, people in this country, many of them are very happy with what's happening. I think you're going to continue to see the Trump administration really scaling up. They've set a goal of deporting 1 million people a year, which is a huge increase from existing practice. And as part of that, the congressional legislation that's being considered right now for the budget would include funding for 100,000 detention beds.
Trevor Hughes is a national correspondent with USA Today. Thanks as always, Trevor.
You bet.
President Donald Trump reignited trade tensions to end the week with back-to-back social media posts targeting Apple and the European Union. In a morning message on his platform Truth Social, Trump warned Apple CEO Tim Cook of a new 25% import tax if his company's trademark iPhones are not made in the United States. A half hour later, Trump wrote that he was recommending a 50% tariff on the European Union starting June 1st. The comments sent global markets into another round of turmoil after weeks of de-escalation had brought some relief from market chaos. Trump's warning to Apple came as the company is planning to shift production of iPhones sold in the U.S. from China to India by the end of 2026. Trump said he long ago informed Cook he expected these iPhones to be built in the U.S. Meanwhile, Trump said his administration's talks with the EU are going nowhere, and he said the tariffs on EU imports will go into effect if European companies don't relocate manufacturing bases to the U.S. That demand seemed improbable to be met with the June 1st date just over a week away. Hours after Harvard University sued the Trump administration for revoking its ability to enroll international students, a federal judge temporarily barred the Department of Homeland Security from allowing the change to take effect. U.S. District Judge Allison Burroughs, a Barack Obama appointee, granted the Ivy League school's request for a temporary restraining order yesterday. She wrote that the administration's new policy would bring immediate and irreparable injury to Harvard's campus. The ban took effect immediately and will remain in place until the judge decides whether to issue a broader pause while the two sides battle in court. A hearing to consider a preliminary injunction is set for next week. President Trump signed a series of executive orders yesterday intended to overhaul the regulation of commercial nuclear reactors and speed the process of building and deploying nuclear power. The move involves a long-held Republican goal of deregulating nuclear power. According to a senior White House official, the 4 executive orders aim to expedite reactor research and development, streamline regulations to allow the Pentagon and other agencies to build reactors on federally owned land. They also changed the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and set new timelines for its consideration of construction permits and expand domestic uranium production and enrichment capabilities. The NRC has overseen commercial nuclear reactors since its creation in 1975. The U.S. has only 2 operational commercial reactors whose construction was approved since 1978. For a conversation on nuclear power and whether it's the solution, check out our special episode. There's a link in today's show notes. Tomorrow marks 5 years since the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The murder sparked a massive outpouring of grief and anger as protesters took to the streets with signs echoing some of his last words, "I can't breathe." Artists across the country adorned their cities with his image, and the intersection where Floyd took his last breaths was transformed from a gas station and corner store into a living memorial. But the future of the square has been a subject of heated debate, and across the nation, other memorials honoring Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement have been removed, vandalized, or fallen into disrepair. As symbols of Floyd's place in history have faded, so too have hopes for federal police reform, commitments to DEI, and American optimism about the future of racial justice. You can read more on that ahead of tomorrow's anniversary with a link in today's show description. With the Indianapolis 500 car race set for tomorrow, a cheating scandal has hit IndyCar. I spoke with Indianapolis star motorsports reporter Nathan Brown for more on that and a look ahead to tomorrow's big race. Nathan, thanks for hopping on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So starting with this, what happened with this cheating scandal? Give us some basics here.
We'll take us back to Sunday afternoon for the second day of Indy 500 qualifying here at IMS, and 2 of the 3 cars for Team Penske, the cars of Joseph Newgarden and Will Power, Joseph being the driver who's won this race each of the last 2 years, were found to have had an illegally modified safety device on the back of their cars. That's probably the simplest way to put it. Every car, before they go through each step in the qualifying process, has their car go through tech inspection to make sure all of the competitive pieces on the car are within the legal limits and everything else on the car is safe and properly put together. These 2 pieces on the back of the cars called the attenuator. It's essentially a piece that sticks out the lower portion of the back of the car that's used to help lessen the blow that ultimately gets to the drivers in the instance of a crash or some sort of a rearward impact, had been modified to basically just have 2 pieces that were sitting right next to each other, have a seam in between them filled in, smoothed over, and ultimately that stood out to the tech inspectors on the IndyCar side, and they were reminded that this was a part that is not supposed to be modified according to the rule book, and ultimately they were not allowed to make their runs on Sunday.
Okay, so Nathan, for those of us outside the motorsports community, just help us understand how big a deal this is and how this is landing with the motorsports world.
There are 2 main aspects to this. One, from a competition standpoint, Joseph Newgarden has won this race each of the last 2 years. No one in the previous 108 runnings of the Indy 500 has ever won this race 3 times in a row. So Joseph was coming into this year attempting to do something no one has ever done in what is considered the biggest race in the world. And he's had an incredibly fast car. No one has also ever won this race farther back than 28th place. And the last time that happened was in 1936. The other big part to come out of this is the idea that there could be changes to the way in which this sport is governed in the future. I'd reported back last month in April that IndyCar had been considering and having talks about the creation of a third-party officiating body that would officiate the races. So that's hand out penalties, make sure everything is up to snuff when cars are on track, as well as an independent crew that would manage and lead that tech inspection process. There are some concerns out there because it appears this modification with this car was missed for more than a year. It's just not something that IndyCar says it has checked all that often. This is something that had been apparently illegally on the cars since before last year's Indy 500 that Joseph won. And so there has been a massive calling from folks throughout the paddock, a lot more publicly than we've really ever seen, that IndyCar needs an independent group to make sure that there are no conflicts of interest within the sport. No one has ever accused Roger Penske of exercising any sort of overt influence on the way this sport is officiated or in any attempt to give any special treatment to Team Penske. But it's just really the optics of this whole situation that continue to be a problem whenever his team or his drivers are in the news on the wrong side of things. And because this team is very successful, they're always fighting for race wins and championships. And it's just become something that's been a little bit too hard to ignore and something that I think we will see change here potentially in the next 6 months to a year.
Well, it's clear to me, Nathan, this cheating scandal will hang over the race this weekend at least a little bit. But what are some other storylines you're looking out for Sunday? And just help our listeners, Nathan, understand how big the Indy 500 is in motorsports.
The Indianapolis Motor Speedway will play host to roughly 350,000 people on Sunday. If you took stock of other cities throughout the state, this racetrack alone would be the second largest city in the state of Indiana. This is the first time that this race has sold out its grandstands since 2016. We've got lots of drivers, big names in the sport, hoping to go for their first ever Indy 500. You've got your two-time defending series champion Alex Palou, championship contenders for years and years, Pato O'Ward and Colton Herta. You've got that history that Joseph Newgarden is going for. It's always a really crazy day here at the track. This race is the largest single day sporting event in the world, and it's something really special not only to watch on TV but to experience in person.
All right, Nathan Brown covers motorsports for the Indianapolis Star, part of the USA Today network. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
You can tune into the Indy 500 tomorrow afternoon around 12:45 Eastern Time on Fox, and you can follow along with USA Today Sports and the Indy Star. What does it take to become a Pulitzer Prize-winning humorist? Have a thick skin and don't take anything too seriously.
One of the things you learn if you write in any kind of column, but especially a humor column, is no matter what you write, somebody's going to be really angry at you and want you fired. There was a certain percentage of my readers, I called them the humor impaired, who never figured out that I was kidding.
Humor columnist Dave Barry is out with a memoir that chronicles his childhood through adulthood and finds the funny in even the darkest places. Here's conversation with my colleague Dana Taylor tomorrow morning right here on this feed. And thanks for listening to The Excerpt. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio. And if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson. I'll be back Monday for Memorial Day right here on The Excerpt from USA Today.